Okay, so Be'ezras Hashem, we are going to be looking at Torah Kuf Tzadi Beis in the Likkutei Moharan. Kuf Tzadi Beis. And this teaching is ultimately going to give us a point of inflection to have a new relationship with the book that we're reading this Torah out of. So it's almost like an instruction manual for the book itself, but it's only revealed as a teaching that comes out within the book itself. Similar to what Rabbi Nassim describes, that very often you're going to find in Kedusha that because of the inherent connection and unity between the beginning and the end and the beginning, that sometimes it's going to be difficult to identify where the beginning starts and when the end takes place. For example, the classic example given in the Maharal is a beautiful explanation on this in Der Chaim, but with regards to the tongues for the Beis Hamikdash, that the tongues needed for the development of the Kalim of the Beis Hamikdash had a prerequisite that it too needed to be made out of tongues. And so the question was, from whence does the first set of tongues emerge if there were no tongues available to make the tongues that are a prerequisite for the development of tongues? And ultimately, what Chazal tell us is that the first set of tongues were created bein hashmashos. And the secret of bein hashmashos is that it serves as a starting point and an end point at the very same time. As I believe the svara of the Avnei Nezer when it comes to understanding the nature of mibein hashmashos, it's not a question of we're not quite sure whether it's nighttime or daytime, and therefore we don't say which it is, but rather it's both daytime and nighttime at the same time. And so this is a teaching that reveals how to learn the book of the Tzaddik, but you can't find the teaching about how to learn the book of the Tzaddik until you're halfway through the book of the Tzaddik, and it's meant to remind you that you have to go back to the beginning now and start the entire process of learning the book of the Tzaddik again. Da. A person must know. And again, when the Torah starts with Da, it reveals an intuitive truth that is going to seem like a surprise, but ultimately is going to be clear and present in front of us. Da shedibor emes sheyoytze mipi hatzadik emes afilu b'milei da alma shehu yakar midivrei Torah shel tzadik acher. This already is going to bring us in contact with the previous teaching, that one word of truth from the tzaddik emes. Again, it's not just a word from the tzaddik emes. It's not just a true word from a tzaddik. It's a true word from a tzaddik emes. Afilu b'milei da alma, even if it is with regards to matters of this worldliness, right? The sichas chulin of the tzaddik emes, hu yakar midivrei Torah shel tzaddik acher. The divrei chulin of a tzaddik on a higher level is higher than the Torah of a tzaddik on a lower level. And again, this should at this point be a familiar svara to us, because what Rabbeinu works with so clearly is the skeletal system of the Ari, which is that the lowest point of the higher level becomes the highest point of the lower level. And we saw how in truth the process is that every level is always going up, but there's also an interconnectivity between the lowest level of the higher level and the highest level of the lower level, meaning this klal of erchin. What erchin represents, what the relativity principle in Kabbalistic thinking, so to speak, that's developed in the Arizal, from the Rashash into the Torah's Chacham, is as follows. Erche kinuyim bilvad is something that the Rashash says. He says that be'emes hakol tali be'erche hakinuyim bilvad. In the end of the day, when we're dealing with trying to understand why certain situations are different than other situations, it's not that we're dealing with different parts. Because in truth, every situation is composed of the same parts. We're not dealing with a shift from the frame or the system in which existence is operating. The only difference that is actually taking shape that distinguishes one thing from another is the relative point of position that a person is perceiving the system itself. So, for example, and the Leshem explains this explicitly, that let's say I'm looking at myself as an individual. As an individual, I have midos, I have chesed, gvur, tferes, netzach, chod, and yesoid, and I have a malchus. Right? So I have a vak. I have elements of myself that are not full yet. I don't have the gar. I don't have a chachma, bina, and das yet. And so from this perspective of a person being a vak, a person being a davar that's shavur, a broken thing, so when I look up towards the level that I would like to go to, that level is seen as perfectly whole. And when I look down at the level that I'm coming from, that level is completely deficient, which means that when I'm wedged between the lower level that I'm coming from and the higher level that I'm going to, it turns out that my position is somewhere wedged between the beginning and the end, which means that it can be applied to both perspectives. So again, I want to highlight what I'm trying to say because it's going to be very important for the sake of our Torah, and it also explains the strange thing I wrote about Torah's Chacham and aliens. That there's a relativity principle, which means that whenever every partsuf, you know what, let's give the real introduction and then we'll go directly into the Torah. Every partsuf, every configuration is composed of 10 spheros. Everything in the world has 10 spheros to it. But when it comes to actually looking at it, there's two separate categories within that full set of 10 that compose two different parts of each thing. There's the Zayin Tachtoinim and there's the Gar. There's the seven lower spheros, which represent what we refer to as Vak, as the Vav Ktsavos, as the lower part of self, deficient of Moichin. And then there's the Gar, the Moichin of Keser, Chachma, and Bina, or Chachma, Bina, and Das, that gets drawn down in order to be Mashlim, my Zayin Tachtonim. So we know that there's five chalakim of the nefesh. There's nefesh, ruach, neshama, chaya, and yichida. So the nefesh and the ruach represent malchus, which is nefesh, which is the body, and ruach represents zer anpin, which represents chesed, gvura, tiferes, netzach, hod, and yesod. And those two levels of the self are arranged and aligned in a full state from the outset of creation. Human beings, Yiddish neshamos, do not have to work on their nefesh and on their ruach. Our bodies and our emotional frequencies are aligned to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They're covered over by layers and layers of filth and concealment. Okay, naniach, a person has to do an immense amount of scrubbing, but when it comes to the most basic principles of the nefesh and the ruach, those things are filled. That's perfect. Each person is always at least Zayin Tachtoinim, at least the lower seven midos of themselves. During the week, what I'm doing when I'm trying to have kavana, when I'm trying to daven, when I'm trying to be mamshech something to myself, I'm drawing down the neshama. I'm drawing down the mochin of bina. The week is identified with the mochin of bina. Then comes Friday night, and there's a transition between drawing down the mochin of bina, and it becomes the time where I'm drawing down the mochin of abba. So now, not only am I trying to draw the neshama down to myself, but I'm also trying to bring my chaya down to myself. And then by mincha and Shabbos, so Zer Anpin goes up to Keser, it's Rava de Ravin, and we're masig the Yechida, we're masig the Keser. And so we have a shlemus of the partsuf. Now we have the lower part of the self and the upper part of the self unified. These two parts that compose each and every partsuf can be identified as something that is chaser and something that is shalem. When I'm looking only at the Zayin Tachtonim, when I'm looking at the lower part of myself, my body and my emotional valence that is always there, that is still in a situation of being mechusar, of being deficient, the upper spheros of my moichin. And I need to be mamshech moichin, I need to draw down consciousness. Nimtza, that in and of myself, I'm mechusar, I'm deficient, and until I draw down the upper three spheros of Chachma, Bina, and Das, only then am I going to be Shalim. So that's each partsuf, has these two parts to it. The Gar, the upper part of the self, and the Zayin Tachtonim, the lower part of the self. And therefore, I can look at myself as a full unit. But every partsuf, like we said already in the name of Rabbeinu, over and over, is a link in a chain. And it has something that preceded it, and it also has something that's following it. Every step and level of growth in Avodas Hashem, every bracha, every tefillah, every day, is simply another attempt to come closer to the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is perpetually removed from our grasp, and all we have accessibility to is the slow and steady perpetual ascent over and over, while the infinite limit continues to rise beyond our grasp as we rise up. And so each and every level that I find myself at, I have to look at it from two perspectives, other than where I'm at right now, where I'm coming from, and where I'm going to. Yeah? Everybody with me? Now, in and of myself, when I look at myself, I can have chisaron and I can have shlemus. I can have zayin tachtonim and I can have my gar, and it depends on the valence. So either I'm going to be chaser or I'm going to be shalim, but I have both possibilities at once. When I look at the previous level that I'm coming from, it was the same truth over there. It was still just a vak. It was zayin tachtonim. There was an element of chisaron. But klap it, when I'm looking back on a moment that I have just passed and moved on from, I need to look at that framework that I've just passed as complete, as deficient in relationship to where I'm standing now. When I grow from a lower level, that previous level was whole, and I graduate to a new level, I now look back on the level that I've come from as deficient again. And when I'm looking at the level that I'm going to, that becomes the new shleimus that I'm trying to run to. So the level above me is always considered as shalem, the level below me is always considered as chaser, and the middle, which is me, is shalem and chaser at the very same time. Now, once I reach that level that I perceived as being the height and shleimus, that level itself is then revealed to be deficient in relationship to the next level that opens up on top of it. And so we see that something can be seen in three different ways, in spite of the fact that it's the same exact thing. Vis-a-vis itself, everything is both shalom and chaser at the same time. Vis-a-vis where I'm coming from, the previous parts of looks like it's a chisaron in relationship to where I'm at right now. That it was a lower elementary level of spiritual experience in relationship to the level of grasp that I have now. And the level above my conscious awareness is something that looks completely shalom that I don't have accessibility to. And each and every level that I go up, every time I go up a level, so the level that I'm at right now becomes the level that's below me, and it goes back to being deficient. The level that was above me, which I thought was shalem, I now enter into and I realize, oh, there's two parts to it, shalem and chaser, and then a new level opens up in front of me, which is the new shlemus that I have to run to. Ad Ein Sof. This is one of the ways that Erche HaKinuyim is expressed, that really we're always dealing with the same materials. Everything in the world is composed of 10 spheros, of a gar and a vak, of the upper three spheros and the lower parts of the self. But dependent on the valence and the relative positioning in which I'm gazing at it, it's going to either be considered completely deficient and whole, or completely whole at the same time. And so we see that our determination of what is whole and what is deficient is not based on the material that makes up that thing, but rather on the relative positioning by which I am glancing at this perspective right now. Does that make sense, Chevra? That is Erche HaKinuyim Bilvad. And again, that's not the sugya we're learning right now, but that is how we get to a place of seeing how in relationship to the higher level, Malchus is the lowest of that level. But in relationship to the level below it, that Malchus becomes the highest level. And so too, vice versa. The highest level of the lower level, the Keser, when I graduate a level, I come up to the new Malchus and I come to realize, wow, I thought I was complete. And now I come to find that I'm deficient again. Does that erase my previous completion? No, it just reveals to me the secret of Erche HaKinuyim, that I could be both at the same time. These moichin of Erchin, the moichin of Erche HaKinuyim Bilvad, is ultimately the ability to balance the paradox at the same time. And so now let's see what Rabbi Nachman is describing. We should know that a true word from the true tzaddik, from the mouth of the true tzaddik, even if it's with mundane matters, is more valuable than the words of Torah of another tzaddik. Because when it comes to the divrei Torah of the other person, meaning let's say the keser of the higher level, it's very possible that it's filled with all sorts of pollution and different expressions and impressions that are engraved into that teaching. Aval zeh hadibur, but the words of the true tzaddik, hayotze mipi tzaddik emes, hu rak emes levad. We're aware that in the terms of the gradations of truth, the clarifications of truth are that the more I refine the untruth and I come to a higher level of truth, so those words are going to be considered wholly true in relationship to the falsehood of the previous world. And again, this is also Erche HaKinuyim. When it comes to emes, the Balatani explains this most powerfully, but Titein emes liYaakov. What do you mean Titein emes liYaakov? Yaakov is emes. What are you saying? Give emes to Yaakov. Elama, emes is also relative positioning. And in truth, all of the emes that we're masig in this world in relationship to what we consider as sheker is also considered as sheker in relationship to the emes la'amiso, which reveals that our entire conception of truth and falsehood is skewed. And so there's gradations to all of this. And so in accordance with the truth of that tzaddik, so too is going to be the refinement of their words, which means their malchus is higher than the keser of the lower tzaddik, whose Torah is of a lower level than the mundane dibur. Ulachein, v'kevan shurak emes, and because that tzaddik is only emes, ein bo shum ta'aroivus, there's no concealment, there's no admixture, ein yakar mimenu, there's nothing more valuable than this. Umisha shomeya, Misha Shemea Dibor Mipia Tzadika Emes. And someone who hears words that are spoken by the true tzaddik, Shu Dibor Emes, and those words contain the truth value that that tzaddik himself has lived with, Ubeprat kishero oto az, especially if a person has the capacity of seeing the face of the tzaddik in the moment that those words are being conveyed. In the aspect bebechinas vehayu einayich roya esmarayich, that your eyes, einecha roas esmarecha, that your eyes should see your teacher. When your eyes behold the teacher, you receive the words in a deeper, more imprinted way. Umekabel bechinas hapanim shal hatzadik ubechinas sichloi v'nishmasa. When a person is hearing Torah from the tzaddik, from the true tzaddik, what they're receiving is not only the information. The information can be conveyed in a book. What they are receiving in that processing, in that face-to-face lived experience of receiving from the tzaddik, what the tzaddik is also giving over is their panim. They're giving over the panim, the pnimius of what they are, the pnimius of what they come to be megala in this world, at least according to our grasp of it, as well as the bechina of their seichel and their neshama. So we're getting the panim, the seichel, and the neshama. Again, neshama, seichel, panim are Roshei Tevos nefesh. We're getting the nefesh of the tzaddik. Because all of the hasagos that we can possibly receive of the tzaddik, no matter how lofty we think they are ultimately still only the lowest level of the tzaddik expression to us. That the tzaddikim amitim, like Moshe Rabbeinu, like Rabbi Shimon, like the Ari, like the Baal Shem Tov, like Rabbeinu, are ultimately far more mitzumsam than they are revealed. Every word that the tzaddikei emes speak lends itself to infinite acts of tzimtzum, as Rabbeinu describes in the process of the hamshacha of Torah melamala from the tzaddikim amitim, and the process of being malbishit through the gradation so that it can be received in a particular way. It's all tzimtzumim. So the neshama, the panim, and the seichel that the tzaddik is giving over to us when they teach is also ultimately just the nefesh of that tzaddik. That's why it's Roshei Tevos Nefesh. But nevertheless, the receiver is receiving all of it. They're not just receiving the information. They're receiving the imprint, the DNA, so to speak, of what that tzaddik comes to reveal in this world. One of the true marks of a tzaddik is that when there's a hischadshus hadibor, it's not just sifsuf milim ba'alma. It's not just repetition, and it's not just using words endlessly, but there's a very delicate balance and simsum created in terms of the choice of the words that the tzaddikei emes use, and therefore each and every word contains within itself the nefesh of the tzaddik as well, because their panim is in it, their seichel is in it, and their neshama is in it. It's not random vortlach, Rahman al-Itzlan, but rather it's a Torah's Chaim, it's a path of life that the tzaddik is being mashpia down. Each and every sefer of a tzaddik, befrat the tzaddikim amitim, befrat the yechidei hadoros, the talmidim of the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh, the Gra and his talmidim, the Rashash, the Ramchal, every sefer that was nichtav Ruach HaKodesh up into including the Ramah, as the tzaddikim point out. The neshama of the tzaddikim live in those books. They live in those books, as we're going to see. They're not just giving over their idea, they're giving over their very essence and self in the words that they speak. When a person receives this word from the tzaddik, and again, amich kulam tzaddikim, and this is true for any conversation that a person has with a friend. It's also true of each and every nikud of tzaddik within me. When a person is in his poidus, they're encountering their own nikud of tzaddik. They're being mekusher to tzaddiko shel olam, to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as well as the secret of tzaddik yesod olam. This dynamic is true in any process of the relationship between self and tzaddik, no matter what the gradation is. But there's not just the reception of the words, but there's a reception of the depth that informs the expression of those words. We'll go weiter. Ki haneshama, kizat tzaddik maniach sichla b'soich zia adibor ha'machadesh, v'makabel zia adibor nimtza. It turns out that when I'm receiving the word of the tzaddik, I'm also receiving their seichel that they engarb within the dibor itself. And the seichel, the mind, the intellectual processes of the tzaddik is nothing other than the neshama of the tzaddik. The neshama of the tzaddik is engraved in the words. We just saw a teaching from the Rebbe last week that literally when a person is learning the Torah, the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh, you're processing the neshama of the Baal Shem Tov that expressed itself in those words. Mamela, when I'm learning those words, I become a seat of the expression of the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh, and by learning the words of the tzaddikim, it's almost as if, the Rebbe says, we are becoming those tzaddikim and the words of those tzaddikim that we're reading. And so when the seichel of the tzaddik comes down in the form of the Torah, as creative as it looks, as radical as it looks, as amazing and as much sense as it makes, the ikr nakuda of the Torah is the neshama of the tzaddik that's coming down through the Torah. Ki neshama hu pnimius ha-seichel. The seichel and intellectualization and thematics and creativity and all of the beautiful elements of what makes a beautiful Torah a Torah is just a levush, is just an external garment to the pnimius haseichel of the tzaddik who's revealing that Torah, and the pnimius haseichel is the element of the neshama. Ki haneshama hi bechinas haseichel, because the neshama is the element of the seichel. How do we know? Kamosha kasuv v'nishmat shaddai tavinim. So this Rabbeinu uses all the time. This pasuk from Eov as a proof to align the seichel and the neshama. Because who's to say that the way that human beings think and the machinations that we go through to try and function in this world and the defense mechanisms, this and that, and all of our contemplation and extensions of consciousness, who's to say that there's anything actual in them? Who's to say that they're real? Who's to say that they're connected to the Spirit of God? Who's to say that they come from the neshama, which is the ner of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that burns within each and every one of us? So after Eov's friends tried conveying a certain element of comfort, the next friend steps up and he says, "Okay, I'm going to try and answer something here." And he says, "Achen ruachu be'enosh." So too, it turns out that there's a spirit that moves in man, v'nishmat shaddai tavinim, and it's the Spirit of God that gives them understanding. And the Malbim and Rashi and Rabbeinu takes it and runs with it. Ultimately, see this as an indication of the fact that what we thought was within our own hands and our own responsibility, which is our thinking and our seichel, in truth is coming from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Nishmat shakai tavinim means that it turns out if we actually look at what our thoughts are, we come to find that our thoughts are also coming from Hashem. In the secret of the Cha Amar Libi Bikshu Panai, that you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you whisper into my own heart to come and seek you out, meaning you're the one telling me to seek you out. And when a person is mevatel themselves completely, they come to find that the thoughts themselves, if I attune my ears to my thoughts, that I can hear Devarim Chadashim, I can hear Ruach HaKodesh, I can hear the pa'amon of the sefichei nevuah that shine forth within every neshama. The secret of the seichel, which we thought was our own, is in truth just the vehicle that reveals the ratzon of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And so it turns out that when a tzaddik is expressing their words in a way of seichel, if it's a tzaddik emes, that seichel is also reflective of their neshama, and any thought that tzaddik has that comes down in the form of an eitzah can also be seen as an expression of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's light. A person is also receiving the face of the tzaddik, that which can't be conveyed. Teachings can be conveyed. A book can convey a teaching, but the face forces a person to acknowledge and surrender themselves to the unknown of it all. The face of the other, the panim, reveals an endless depth to it. Tahoim el tahoim koira. That abyss calls out to abyss. When a person, the head nod that we give to Jews in the street, where you nod your head a little bit, what that is tahoim el tahoim koira. The abysmal depths of one yid is crying out to the abysmal depths of another yid, the endless depths, the abyss that goes down, down, down to the very source of creation. The panim reminds me that I don't have a hasaga. I thought I knew what the teaching was saying, but when I can reveal the face within the teaching, I come to find that the inner essential nakuda is not something that can be written down. It's not something that can be conveyed other than through the face of the person conveying it, by the face of the tzaddik. Because the face of the tzaddik comes through his dibor, ki dibor shehu medaber hu emes. When the tzaddik is speaking, it's words of emes, Moshe emes v'serasai emes, a river flowing of light that's emergent from the mouths of all of the tzaddikim, and each and every yid. The emes upanim shall kol hapanim de kedusha, and emes is ultimately the truest mark. That's the truest face of holiness. You want to know what holiness looks like? It's emes. Emes, the continuity from aleph to mem to taf. The fluid movement that is endless in its perpetual movement without any susceptibility to stoppage. Something that is true. It's not a particular nakuda, it's a shatach, like we said. There's a relativism that must be included within the secret of truth through the lens of emes la'amiso. the truth of the truth, which reveals that both truth and falsehood are both equal handmaidens in the light of the ultimate truth of truth, which is Hakadosh Baruch Hu b'chvaydoi v'atzmo kavyachol. But the emes that's miskala, the emes that is an aid unto itself, the face need not explain what it is conveying. The face has a toikef to it. Panim chadashos balakan. There's a secret of a face that is illuminative in itself, and that's the secret of emes that emerges from the panim of the tzaddik and the panim of kedusha, in the bechina of mevakshe panecha Yaakov sela, and the aspect of bechinas titain emes the Yaakov. There's two things here with regards to Yaakov. Number one, we're perpetually seeking out the face of Yaakov. And number two, Yaakov Avinu is truth. So Mamela, if we're perpetually seeking out the face, then the face is the truth that we're seeking out. Never grasping, perpetually seeking, in the words of the tzaddikim. Nimtza. So it turns out, if I'm listening to words said by a tzaddik and I see the face of the tzaddik, I'm being makabel the panav and the seichel and the neshama. I'm being makabel the nefesh, which is Rosh Tevos panav seichel v'nishmaso. And what happens then, when I hear the words coming from the mouth that is conveying those words? So this is the ikar nekuda. V'nechkak v'nitztayer b'daiso d'mus diyukno shel hatzadik shu apanim v'aseichel v'neshama. At that point, what happens is that the image of the tzaddik is engraved upon the consciousness of the individual. It creates a chakika, it creates an engraving. And the words of those tzaddik are included within that engraving in the secret of the panim, the seichel, and the neshama. And a person comes to have a real relationship with that idea. That's the way that the tzaddikim hachayim teach Torah. That's the way that we have to receive Torah from the tzaddikim whose faces we can receive. But okay, you just told us this very beautiful thing of having the face of the tzaddik and nechkak in front of us, perpetually being aware of the feeling that one feels when they're most aligned. But a person has to protect themselves from shichacha. Nishkach kemes min halev, that death and being separate from something also gives birth to forgetfulness. Forgetfulness and death, something that is there but falls away from my conscious awareness. We have to protect ourselves from that because it's not going to do anything for us. We need the active engagement of the light of the tzaddikim in our lives. It's not enough to fill the storehouses of our minds with the words of the tzaddikim. It's no longer the vortlach of the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh. It's the derech of the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh. That's what Rabbi Nachman reveals. It's not vortlach. You can't say Dvar Torah from Rabbi Nachman. What you can reveal is an oilam. You can reveal a mode of being. You can reveal a framework in which a person confronts one of the deeper elements of their lives. It's not vortlach. What it is an oilam maleh. Each and every drop of the words of the tzaddikim contains an oilam maleh. And that's what receiving the face of it is. So then, if it's not about the vortlach, it's about shifting every element of my life. That's the radical revision of the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh. So then I have to protect myself from shichacha, ki shichacha meshacheches hakol mimenu. Because forgetfulness causes me to forget everything. Simply stated, but fundamentally true. In the moment of forgetfulness, it's not that I forget one thing. I forget everything. I forgot that I cared. I forgot that I cared. I forgot that I believed in this. I forgot the part of myself where these words were meaningful. That's what happens when a person falls into shichacha, Rahman al-Itzlan. Or anything I received or shaped in an image and a form in my mind, I captured it as a mental picture, is forgotten. And as a result of forgetfulness, I can forget it all, and it can all leave me as if it never had any impact on me whatsoever. Obviously, it always has an impact, but nevertheless, it might feel like it didn't have an impact. And even if a person writes it down for themselves for the purpose of memory, when forgetfulness gets really stark, it's not just about forgetting things that I have to remember. It's about forgetting things that I don't even need to remember. I could look it up in a book. I don't have to remember it. But the shichacha goes down to the bones where I don't care enough to open the book. There's a deep shichacha. When that shichacha falls, nofel b'vchinas ha-shichacha gam al sefer hanichtav. Then even the books that I have on my shelf and in front of me, which contain the insight that I know I need, they're the pharmacies of the tzaddikim. I forget what's written in those books. I forget how badly I need those books. That's how deep forgetfulness goes. To the degree that once that tzaddik who revealed those words passes on, and we can't run and receive the face of that tzaddik again to remind ourselves, As miskaber b'chinas hashichacha, then the words of that tzaddik undergo a certain element of concealment and forgetfulness in the aspect of b'chinas nishtachti kames min halev. It's been forgotten like a dead one from the heart, which is this week's parsha, why Yaakov Avinu had no nechama, because this klal of shichacha, which HaKadosh Baruch Hu has baked into the very fabric of emotional reality, which is that in order for there to be a secret of nechama, there has to be a certain element of forgetfulness. And with Yaakov Avinu, that general klal of human condition wasn't there because Yosef HaTzadik wasn't actually dead. And that's the secret of Aviv Shamar Asadavar. He guarded the roshem of it. He was aware that there was an irreducible trace of it, and he couldn't find comfort because there was nothing that was actually lost. But there's a klal that if something dies and it passes away, so then it really becomes irretrievable. That's the danger of forgetfulness. Forgetfulness means that something is irretrievable. I had something and I've lost it. Forgetting something is an aveda. It's losing something. It's a death of sorts. It's a shvira. It's a tzimtzum. In moments of forgetfulness, a person becomes animal very quickly. I just drove from the Merkaz in Beit Shemesh. I had to go pick something up, and the cashier didn't, live up to my standards and expectations of how I wanted that pagisha to go. And then driving home in the dark here in the traffic of Beit Shemesh, a person forgets everything. A person can literally forget every ounce of kedusha, ruchnias, tahara, and they can give in to the kas and to all of those things that rest right on the other side. But if a person is miskaber on zikaron, if a person clenches their fists and holds tight onto the nakuda that remains even after forgetfulness, then a person has the ability to not honk, and a person has the ability to let go of the frustration and the anger. V'yesh eitzel hazeh. So Rabbi Nachman says there's an eitzah. Don't worry. Even when that tzaddik is no longer shaykh to you, no longer shaykh to the world, no longer shaykh to your world, even if you can't retrieve that original light to reconfirm or reestablish the authenticity of your spiritual standing, even if those things have gone away and it's a ma'avos liyuchel atakein, yesh eitzel hazeh. There's a suggestion for this, says Rabbi Nachman. What's the suggestion? And this is why I chose this Torah, because Rabbeinu is talking about his own book, and he's talking about the book of our hearts, and he's talking about the book of our friends, and he's talking about the books that we live with on each and every day in accordance with each moment's mindfulness. V'yesh eitzel hazeh. Letzayer lefanav demus diyukno shel hachacham b'shas halimud keshalem nimdavarav. You find yourself with a dead book and a dead author and words that feel dead, and they're not hitting their mark. What a person should do is imagine in front of their eyes the image of the author, the face of the tzaddik, or the idea of the tzaddik. In the time that I'm learning it, as Yerushalmi tells me, that when a person learns, it has to be shetzarech litzayer b'shas halimud ki'ilu hatana oimed lefanav, as if the Tana of this statement is standing right in front of me. In my mind's eye, no one's claiming that this is Gilui of Neshamas Tzadikim. Those are dargin. That's not what we're searching for. We're searching for survival. We're searching for how to spark the light from within the death hold of forgetfulness. Be mitzayer, the face of the tzaddik in front of you. We see this with Yaakov and Yosef. Yosef Avinu, not Yosef Avinu, but Yosef, almost like an Av, but not an Av. Yosef falls into the forgetfulness of Mitzrayim. He forgets that Hashem remembers him. He forgets that he's loved. And the only way for him to pull himself out of that concealment is by being mitzayer, the musdiyukna shel aviv. And Rabbi Nachman explains in a very mysterious Torah that the fact that Yosef HaTzadik was able to see Yaakov, and Yaakov didn't know that Yosef HaTzadik was seeing Yaakov, in the same way that the student can contemplate their Rebbe, and the Rebbe doesn't necessarily feel the contemplation of the student, Rabbi Nachman doesn't explain it. He said it's one of the biggest mysteries. It's one of the biggest mysteries. But being mitzayer, the das of that tzaddik in our minds, gives us Misha Mamin b'Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai yesh lo chizuk b'Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai. If I think about the tzaddik and I identify with the tzaddik, and I want what that tzaddik has, and I love the tzaddik, and I love the books of the tzaddik, and I love the mindset that that tzaddik brought down into the world, I have hischabris with the tzaddik. The Mittler Rebbe writes explicitly in Kintros HaShtachvus that all it takes to be considered someone who is a fundamentally considered a real Talmud of the Tzaddik is to learn their books and have an illumination in their soul as a result of it. Once a person has that, they have the din of being a Talmud, and they have the same hasaga of the makifim of their Rebbe's neshama around the yard site that is only belonging to the true Talmidim. That's all it takes to love, to believe, and to connect to the tziur, to the demus of that tzaddik. And if we don't have the face of the tzaddik, so then the empty chair or the sefer. We don't know what the Meshilach looked like. We don't know what Rav Tzaddik looked like. We don't know what the Sfas Emes looked like, Lechora. We don't know what the Ari looked like. We don't know what Rav Chaim Vital looked like. We don't know what the Rashash looked like. We don't know what the Torah's Chacham looked like. We don't know what the Baal Shem Tov looked like, or the Gra, or the Magid. We don't know what the Mittler Rebbe looked like. We don't know what any of these tzaddikim look like. Does that mean we can't focus on who they are? No. They're worlds. They're universes. They're constructs that give birth to realities of thinking. That's what happens when a person is mitzayer, the demus of that chacham within their minds. That it's as if the person who gave over this teaching is standing right in front of me. Ki behasefer shel hachacham, because in the books of the wise, of the Tzaddikei Emes, although Rabbi Nachman is opening up the conditions here, in the books of the Chachamim, Nirsham v'nitztayer sham demus hachacham. There is an engraving and an imprint of the visage, of the face of that wise one. Ki elu hadiburim, these words and these letters, these osios that are engraved, hanyirshamim umutziyarim ba'sefer, that are written in black ink on white paper, literally printed on. Him seichel hachacham v'nishmaso yubechinas panav. I am grasping the full, total expression of the neshama, of the seichel and the panim. Again, just the nefesh of the higher level of the tzaddik, which is just the malchus, like we said, of the higher level. But nevertheless, we're grasping it all. It's all revealed to us there. It's as if I'm encountering a secret of Yechidus. This is ultimately this is one of the miracles of the Baal HaTanya, and what makes Sefer HaTanya such a radical technology. But the Baal HaTanya had two issues, so to speak. One was there were too many people who wanted Yechidus, and there was just not enough time. And number two, like all of the tzaddikim, especially of Chabad, they felt the pain of the Hasidim in such a way that they couldn't accept Kvittel until they were able to empathize and identify with that makom of deficiency. So it became really overwhelming for the Baal HaTanya to care so much and to bear the burden of it. It wasn't a joke. And so the Baal HaTanya says, I'm going to write a book that's going to serve the purpose of Yechidus. How could it be? How could a book, which is the same thing to each and every person, serve the same purpose as Yechidus, which is an individualized process for each and every person? Or phrased differently, how can a book, which is a wholesale item which bears no import of the individual relationship between the person and the author in that book, serve as a stand-in for the face-to-face encounter and the affirmation of ego that comes about by encountering that tzaddik? But what the Baal HaTanya writes, and it's very kedai to look in the introduction of the Hakdamas HaMalakit, that the miracle of Tanya is that you can read it like a book, yet each and every person will come to find the yechidus that they need within it. And again, that's in accordance with the belief that if I open up Likkutei Moharan with the knowledge that, okay, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I need Eitzah, there's no Nevi'im anymore, too lazy to get into my car and drive somewhere, I need Eitzah from a tzaddik. I'm going to open up my Likkutei Moharan, whatever Torah that I'm learning. It doesn't have to be the magic of just randomly opening it. And I'm going to find exactly what the Eitzah of the tzaddik is in accordance to my life in this present moment. It's dependent fully and completely on the shigaon and the emuna that the individual has in the sefer. The sefer, if one does not believe in it, it's nothing. It has nice words in it. It has vortlach in it. But the more and more a person believes in the kedusha of the Tzaddikei Emes and the ultimate truth that, as unreasonable as it is for our modern sensibilities, we do not grasp anything from the tzaddikim. When it comes to Rabbi Nachman, we don't know anything. What he revealed to us was the revealed element of what he was drawing down into this world. The secret of Moshe Rabbeinu's relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we will never know. We won't know what happened in the cloud. We don't know. We can't know. As Rabbeinu says, just as you can't grasp HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'chvaydo v'atzmo, so too you also can't grasp the level of the tzaddik. b'chvodo v'atzmo. Not, God forbid, equating between the two inabilities of grasp, but highlighting the simple fact that vayaminu b'Hashem b'Moshe avdo, the more a person believes in the words of the tzaddikim, the more the words of the tzaddikim become drops of dew that have the capacity of being machayim mesim, berachamim rabim, depending on my belief in the book. Him seichel, the letters in the book, are the mind, the soul, and the face of the tzaddik. Somebody asked me, I used to read a lot of, psychology books or philosophy books. And I stopped doing that at a particular point, not so much because the ideas became less valuable, but because if the author's neshama is not going to reduce the anxiety of being a human being in this world, then it's not worth the effort it takes to read the letters on the page. When a person opens up a chumash or a gemara or a sefer halacha or a sefer of a tzaddik or any sefer that they're connected to that mechaber, so what they're drawing down more potently than the words on the page is the influx of spiritual comfort and calmness that comes from the light of the tzaddikim in the secret of Kedai Lismoch. Al kein nimsa b'chol sefer v'sefer v'nimsa shesichlo v'nishmasa v'panav, the mind, the soul, and the face of that tzaddik, shehu dmuso mamish, which is actually the image of the tzaddik, hu be'elu ha'oisios v'hatevos. It's hidden within these letters and the words in the book. Al kein, therefore, it turns out, nimsa b'chol sefer v'sefer dmus diyukna shel hachacham shechidish elu adiburim. The face of the tzaddik, who created the novelty and revealed the novelty of these words, is hidden within these words. Ki kafi demuso, in accordance with the image of that tzaddik, are the words of that tzaddik. Meaning, Abba b'mazal yirtvei, the Torah of the Tzaddikei Emes is a reflection of who they are, which is why Rabbi Nachman opens up this teaching with saying, how do we know that the Sichos Chulin of the Tzaddik Emes are higher than the Torah of other Tzaddikim? What value is there in Sichos Chulin unless they're expressive of the Tzaddik Emes? A tzaddik emes is someone who is so suffused with emes, which is clear from the beginning, the middle, and the bottom, that every word that is coming out of my mouth is ultimately reflective of the same principles that the deepest parts of Torah are reflective of. And memela, if there's emes to it, if there's a deep-seated truth and continuity between the beginning, middle, and end, and there's no shifting, when I shift what I'm doing, I'm not shifting who I am in my core. As memela, any word that I'm speaking lends itself, any words that the tzaddikim are speaking lend themselves to drisha and chakira and uncovering the dmus of that tzaddik who lives within those words and those letters. Ki im haya lahachacham dmus acher, hainu seichel v'panim v'neshama acheres. If the tzaddik had a different face, if the Meshiloach looked differently than the way he looks, then the Torah conveyed to us in the name of the Meshiloach would be a different Torah. Elamah, the Torah that is conveyed to us in the name of the Meshiloach, for example, is reflective of the face of the Meshiloach. And the way that I find comfort within the writings of that tzaddik is my basic understanding of who that tzaddik must have been. And when I come to find comfort in the words of the tzaddik, what I'm taking comfort in is the neshama of that tzaddik, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives strength to that neshama of the tzaddik to give me strength to find comfort in their words. And when a person merits to remember the face of the Chacham through the words of the Chacham, as they were said by the Chacham, or by way of pushing myself against my limit, if my natural tendency is to do something 100 times, to push that 101st time, that through reviewing 101 times, or uncovering that idea, I'll come to remember and I'll come to grasp the face of the tzaddik in that particular element of my life. So now, when I've truly grasped this idea, now I'm saying over the words of the Chacham, it's as if the tzaddik himself is saying those words, whispering those words to me. And there's a panim to panim encounter with that tzaddik. When a person is learning the Torah, they're encountering Moshe Rabbeinu. They're encountering HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the one who gives us the Torah. When I'm reading the Torah, how could it be? The same is true when learning Torah, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Kavyachol, the or and the panim of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is also mislabish in the Torah. That's the secret of Shechina Medaberes Misoch Grono. When a person is giving Torah so clearly, in a level of Lishma, where it's Mavuto B'tachlis Abitul, so Mamela, they're just becoming parrots for the Shechina. Again, all of this highlights the simple fact that there are ways of reading that provide information, and that information that can then be used against the struggles of our lives. And there's a deeper way of reading, which is in and of itself the encounter with the light that one is seeking. And to take refuge in holy books and to find comfort within the books that litter our shelves. And the secret of Vave Beis Vad L'Chachamim, Rav Soloveitchik describes this very often in the beautiful kind of audios that they have of him describing what happens in the middle of shir that he was given. He says, I'm sitting there reading the Mishnah, then in walks the Tana. I'm trying to converse with the Tana. Then in walks the Rishonim. Then the Rambam knocks on the door and he comes in, and Rav Chaim Brisker comes in. And all of a sudden it's Mesoras HaTorah taking shape in front of me. I'm a participant now in the Torah that is Nimshach from Har Sinai in the secret of Moshe Shapir Kamart. That every part of ourselves and each person in relationship to where they're standing in their grasp of Torah is either Moshe or Rabbi Akiva. Moshe in the sense that I know the general principles, but I don't know how to properly apply it. Or Rabbi Akiva, which is I know how to apply in all of the particulars, but I run the risk of forgetting the source of Moshe. And the secret of what we have to do is to be Am Yisrael, which is a yichud of Ayin and Mem, which is Akiva and Moshe. We have to be a yichud of Akiva and Moshe, of the Torah that was given over and the Torah that is perpetually being given over when we read the words of the tzaddikim, realizing that they're coming back to life. And there's a tchias hamesim inherent within every act of reading from the books of the tzaddikim. V'zeh, and this is what Chazal tell us in Maseches Avos Perek Daled. Haloi med yeled, someone who teaches a young child. Lamahu doime. What's it like? And Chazal say it's like writing on a clean piece of paper. And teaching someone who's older, what's it like? It's like writing on a piece of paper that had something written on it originally. It was erased, and then it was rewritten upon. So what does it mean, haloi med yeled, someone who teaches a child? Kizeh haloi med matalmud hu mamish kakoisev b'dio al haniyar v'hametzayer oisiois sichlo sham. Then in the face-to-face encounter with teaching, and again, every relationship in our lives, as Rabbeinu points out elsewhere, can also be seen through the lens of Rebbe Talmud, Mashpia Makabel. This is taking shape in every erech, every relative position. And Rabbeinu says that one person can be giving over to somebody else in one moment and receiving from that very same person in the next moment. Or you could have a group of 3 people and one person is serving both roles. Like we said in the Klal HaErchen from the Rashash and the Torah Chacham. That anytime a person is learning, it's as if those words are being inscribed upon their brain. This is originally how the psychologists really identified thinking. When Freud was asked, Lahavdil, what's the best way to describe the thought process? He referred to it as a palimpsest. A palimpsest was ultimately like something called a mystical writing pad, where you write, and then eventually the letters that were written never get erased, but they get written on top of, and each layer continues to be legible in spite of the fact that it is now written on top of other levels of engraving. That's how he wanted to refer to as the process of cognition, of engraving thoughts upon thoughts upon thoughts. And we see this right here, that Lahavdil, right? Or that, again, Freud was taking from a place in Kedusha, in the secret of Pitron HaChalomos, which we discussed today in Shir. When a person is teaching, to a true Talmud, to someone who's receptive, not only are they engraving the teachings upon the mind of the individual, but they're also engraving their own image, the way in which those teachings are conveyed. But there's different ways in which teaching takes shape. Meaning to say, this inherent encounter between teacher and student, and the bond between teacher and student, Rebbe and Talmud, is not inherent within every act of education. There's an element of teaching a child. What's the element of teaching a child? The element of teaching a child, Rabbi Nachman is saying here, it's not that you're teaching. Whenever I'm teaching something, Chaver, are you with me? Whenever a person is teaching something, They're giving over their mind and they're giving over their visage, their face, their persona that is going to be conveyed by way of the teaching that they're conveying. But Rabbi Nachman says there are different gradations of learning. So, in order to reveal those different gradations of learning and the impact it will have on the Talmud, Rabbi Nachman goes to the Mishnah and Avos, which creates the distinction between different forms of teaching. That what's it like to teach a child? It's like writing fresh words on a fresh piece of paper. What's it like to teach an older person? It's like writing words on an older piece of paper. But the Chazal are talking about the Yeled being the student. Over here, however, Rabbi Nachman is saying that the teacher themselves becomes a Yeled. That Ketzi Dami Haloimed Yeled means that the teacher themselves becomes like a young child, and that's a form of teaching. What is it? What is the state when the teacher becomes a young child? When it's as if the idea is emergent within their mind for the very first time, as if it was emergent today. When the tzaddik, when the chacham, when the teacher is capable of conveying the words as if they were given over in that moment for the sake of themselves in that moment, so then it's haloimed yeled. And so now let's look at what Rabbi Nachman is saying. There's the aspect of haloimed yeled. Hainu keshatalmid shomea hadavar mipi harav mamish ube'esh shachidash harav es hadavar. So when the student is hearing the words of the tzaddik, of the Rav, in the moment in which those words are coming into fruition, and the moment of their being given over, that's the moment of Chiddush. When the mouth opens and it engraves its words, that's the moment of Chiddush. In that moment, the mashpia, the tzaddik, is like a yeled. Sha'az hu bebechinas yeled. Why? Ki hachidushim nishavim al yidei mashem ma'ale es hanefashos bebechinas ibur machadeshosam. When it comes to the Torah of a tzaddik, when it comes to the Torah of any teacher, what's happening is that there's an awakening to what is going on around them and their surroundings and the people around them. And as a result of what the Talmidim want and what the Talmidim desire, and in accordance with the Hisoirus Man and the Teshuka that the Talmidim have for the Chidushei Torah of the Rav, so too the Torah of the Rav is going to be niskale, and it's going to be like being born out of the impregnation that came about by way of the desire of the students. It's the desire of the student, the desire of the reader. If I'm opening a book, saying I'm looking for a vort, the words are not going to be illuminated in front of me. But if I'm dying because I can't find comfort from the anxiety and I can't find rest for my mind, I open that book, the words are going to be like the Urim V'Tumim. It doesn't mean the tzaddik doesn't have to be alive. The tzaddik is alive in the book. It's in accordance with how I come into the Sefer in terms of what the Sefer is going to offer me. The Baal HaSulam, when Talmidim were writing to the Baal HaSulam for more writings before he came to Eretz Yisrael, he would write back to them sometimes like, explain to me, delineate for me what you're missing without these teachings. Identify for me the points of deficiency, not because there was an ego, God forbid, but because the only kli that has the capacity of drawing down Chidushei Torah is Hisorus, is Mayim Nukvin, is an awareness and a desire for more insight. The more a person yearns for the tzaddikim to reveal themselves in their books, the more the tzaddikim reveal themselves in their books. The Rebbe has been talking recently about how in Likkutei Moharan, like any parts of comes down in the secret of a tzelem. We spoke earlier about the Naran Chai. So that nefesh ruach is referred to as the inner, the pnimi light, and that's the ner. That's the tzadi of selem. Then the lamed is the first makif, and the mem is the second makif, the two levels of makifin. And so the Rebbe said that Rabbi Nachman wrote Likkutei Moharan. Rabbi Nachman wrote Sefer HaNisraf, the burnt book, that he told his Talmidim to burn. And Rabbi Nachman also wrote a book called Sefer HaGanuz. And what the Rebbe pointed out very clearly, based on Makoros as well, and there's a lot to be said about this, is that these are not three separate books. In truth, they are three elements within the singular book of Likkutei Moharan. That Likkutei Moharan has the Sefer of Likkutei Moharan in it. And then when a person learns it with more tshuka and more mesiras nefesh, they uncover the Sefer HaNisraf in it. Then when a person learns with more tshuka and more mesiras nefesh, they come to be masik the Sefer HaGanuz in it. That it's inherent within the book itself, and there's gradations to the levels of hasaga, of the neshama, of the machaber within the book, to the degree that we can open up a book that's been read for 100 years already, with the belief that nobody has quite looked at it like my eyes are going to look at it right now, and there's going to be a new level of insight that comes out to me right now. Let's go weiter to make sure we finish the Torah. The Torah of the Tzaddik at that point is like a yeled. As if the teaching is being revealed in that moment. At that point, it's like fresh ink that's engraved upon a new paper. That it's revealed clearly and engraved deeply without any confusion. At that point, the person has the ability to recall and recollect and engrave within their minds that image of the teacher, and the power and the potency of that teaching can have its impact. But someone who is learning from someone who's like an old person, where the Torah is not mischadesh, where it's not coming down with vitality, they're not hearing it from the chacham, or they're hearing it secondhand, and then the person's neshama was not included within the neshama of that tzaddik in the preparation for the Chidushei Torah. Then it's like a person who's reading words that were the same way they were yesterday. Those words were in yesterday, and they mean the same thing today, and they mean the same thing tomorrow. And at that point, if it's az dome lidiok suva al nir machuk, that point it's as if a person is having those words written on them when something else has already been erased. There was something there; those words are not being niklat properly. Haksav metashte sham. The words are not expressive explicitly. Kein hachidush shemachadish hachacham. So too with the chiddush. Afshe nechtav v'nechkak b'daiso im kol zeh lo nitztayer heitev sham v'yuchol l'shachacho. In that place, if a person is not uncovering, and again, let's look at this in the sense of the reader's responsibility. The responsibility of the reader who's finding the light of the tzaddikim buried within the books is to see to it that the Torah is being revealed to me as if it's halomed yeled, in accordance with my teshuka, in accordance with the deep desire to be masig the panim of the tzaddik. It's enough for the servant to be like their rabbi. What does that mean? La'eved daika. It's enough for an eved, a servant, to be like their rav. Zak the Heilige Rebbe, eved, the level of a servant, the level of someone who serves HaKadosh Baruch Hu, on the level of an eved, is misha zoicher masha makabel mirabo al yidei shechazar mea va'achas pamim k'nizkel el. Someone who's been an Oved Hashem, as the Baal Tanya describes the distinction between Misha Oved Hashem, Misha Lo Oved Hashem, is also learning 101 times. That's the element of an Eved, and it's Dayo Lios Kerabo. Moshedarshu Chazal, like Chazal told us, Oved Elikim, someone who serves HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Zeh HaChoizer Pirko Mea Va'achas Pamim. Va'ayidei Azikaron Zeichel Lios Kerabo. By way of memory, engraving it within my memory, I can be like my Rebbe is right there with me. I could be masig the words as if they were coming down at that moment. Because the image and the visage of the teacher is emergent in front of me. As if the person's Rebbe is telling them these words at the very same moment. Because the image of the Rebbe and the visage of the Rebbe is so engraved, like writing taking place on a clear page. So it's enough for an eved who's tapping into the ink, the dio. It doesn't just mean enough, it means the ink itself is enough to transform a person to a place of face-to-face encounter with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What does it mean that the face of the tzaddik is revealing itself to the Talmud when the Talmud is living for those words? B'chinas dio, it's the element of the ink of the tzaddik. All that's apparent is the visage. It's not the tzaddik ba'atzmo, it's the memory of the tzaddik. This is the secret. That, like we opened up with, when it comes to the hishtalshlus and the hishlabshus and the interconnectivity between worlds, the only thing that's actually being transferred is the lowest level of the higher level down to the lower level, or the highest level of the lower level up to the higher level. Like we said, the neshama, panav, sichlo is all just the nefesh of the tzaddik. It's the lowest level of the tzaddik. And when we're masig that, so there's a halbasha, There's an engarbment, and our neshamos become the levush to the neshamos of the tzaddikim, which is ultimately the tachlis, which is the ibor neshama, when we have more insight, more inspiration, more belief, more faith, more joy. Like the L'Shem Yichud for learning Eitz Chaim is that let me be makusher to the neshamos through whom this Torah was revealed. It's the secret of learning Torah mipi Eliyahu, where a person themselves becomes Eliyahu. And so when it comes to drawing down the Torah of the tzaddikim from above and the halbasha of the darga b'darga, all that actually expresses itself down below is the lowest level of the higher level, meaning the sichas kulin, hainu b'chinas raglin shel elyona, the malchus of the higher level, shuhu v'hu madrega rishoina etzel darga atachtoina. The legs of the higher level become the head of the lower level. The malchus becomes the keser. Chachma takes Yiras Hashem and makes it its crown. So we see that the crowning jewel of Chachma is Yiras Hashem. Anava takes and makes it its Ekev. Ekev Anava Yiras Hashem. So we see that the highest thing by Chachma is in truth the lowest thing by Anava. V'al kain, and therefore lo nitztayer el hadmus. Don't think that we're being masig of the tzaddik themselves. All we're grasping is the lowest level of the tzaddik. But again, when we grasp the lowest level, we're also accessing the entirety of the level. And Misha Mamin Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai Yesh Lo Chizuk Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. How? The chizuk comes about by way of hiskashrus to the chagas of the tzaddik, to the chabat of the tzaddik. Why is it Misha Mamin Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai if I have amuna? Amuna is malchus. Why should that give me chizuk? Elama hatoifes chegelik min ha'etzem toifes it's etzem kulo. Someone who grasps a part of something in truth grasps everything. And the secret of the shattering of the vessels that reveals how each and every fragment of the vessel is a totalitized thing. That I can grasp the lowest level of the tzaddik and still have the chizuk from it. All I'm grasping is the demus. And it's like the dio, it's like the ink of the words of the tzaddik. Even though the full thing is actually expressed there, mamish, the real thing is hidden within those words. Nevertheless, all I have the ability to grasp is the letters themselves. This is a very tifa thing. That even though all that's being revealed is the letters and the words and the image of the tzaddik, nevertheless, hidden within the letters and the words and the image of the tzaddik is the fullness of that tzaddik. And by reading the words of the tzaddikim, we're actually gaining, as Rav Avram ben Rav Nachman. Again, I'm ending off with the same place that we ended off last week, where I want to read the klalim of Rav Avram ben Rav Nachman that teach us that every time a person is learning a Torah in Likkutei Moharan, every single word is re-accessed. Every single word is re-lit up and it's re-magnified, and all of the processes that were contained within them in the moment they were given over by Rabbeinu are taking shape again in new, unfound ways. That's taking shape every single moment. Kain hadibor, so too when it comes to the dibor of the tzaddik. Af shabo nitztayer hadmus, even though we're hearing the words, and the demus of the tzaddik is revealed in the words of the tzaddik, nevertheless, imkol zeh eno eletzir of demus. In fact, it's just an image and a shape of something. It's only the beginning of knowing. Hainu madrega tachtoina shalo, the lowest level of the higher level. Hainu hadibor v'havein. Zebechinas, and this is the aspect of eish shchayra al gabe eish levana, the black fire engraved upon the white fire. All of this is the bechina of moichin. When we're learning the words of the tzaddikim, we're drawing down moichin. We're taking the nahi of bina and drawing it down into the roish of zer anpin. That's the netzachod and yisoid of bina that become the moichin of zer anpin. So when we're reading the words of the tzaddikim, when we're drawing down the lower level of the higher levels, in truth, it's actually an act of hamshachas hamoichin. And the secret of v'noizlin min levanon, that it flows forth from Levanon, love, lev, nun. Nun Share Bina, Lamed Beis Nesivas Chachma. It's the moichin that are drawn down from the Netzach and the Hod and the Yisoid of Zer Anpin, which become the Chachma, Bina, and Das of Malchus. Min Liba, Min Levoina de Moicha, from the whiteness of the mind, from the clarification of the Luban Ha'elyon, the clarification of thought. Zebachina Shchayra Ani V'na'ava. And this is the secret of I am black and I am beautiful. There's a blackness. Kimashu shachar v'shafal etzel elyon, the malchus, lowest level of the higher level, is beautiful in relationship to the lower level because it's our moichin, hu na'ev elyon etzel tachton. And so what Rabbeinu is revealing here is that anytime we open the book to encounter the tzaddik, it depends on our emunah in the book, and when we're reading the book, we're being mamshech moichin of the book. And we have to believe that yes, it's only the letters, but hidden within the letters of all of the tzaddikim of the Torah itself. This is what the Baal Shem Tov, one of the things of the Baal Shem Tov was to go back to the osios, because the osios are the gateway, the osios are the portal, the osios are the secretions of the quintessential spiritual expression that contains everything that I possibly need to re-enter back into that place. Zeh hashar laHashem. All a person needs is malchus. All a person needs is zos. And when we have that, we can enter back in to the full gamut of kedusha, be'ezras Hashem.